Albert Einstein, A New Home in America, and the Fight for Justice. Fleeing Europe's shadows, Einstein's flight to the US. It was a crisp autumn day on October 3, 1933, when Albert Einstein, now an exile from his homeland, stood before an audience in London's Royal Albert Hall. His voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed the storm clouds of oppression gather in Europe. Einstein passionately addressed the crowd on the importance of academic freedom, a theme that resonated deeply in a world where intellectuals like himself were being silenced. The Times of London would later write about how Einstein was wildly cheered throughout his speech, a testament to the symbolic power he had come to represent, a figure of resistance against Nazi tyranny. Just 4 days after this speech, Einstein boarded a ship bound for the United States, leaving behind the Europe he had known and loved, and embracing a new chapter in his life. Despite the offers from prestigious European institutions, Einstein realized that Nazi Germany's rise made it impossible for him to continue his work in safety. His Jewish heritage placed him directly in the crosshairs of Hitler's regime. After much reflection, he chose the United States, where the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, extended a welcoming hand. The institute was to become a haven for intellectuals escaping the tightening grip of fascism. It wasn't just Einstein who found solace there. John von Neumann, the brilliant mathematician, Kurt Gödel, the logician, and Hermann Weyl, a fellow physicist, were among the other refugees who would come to define the institution's early days. Together, they laid the foundations for a unique intellectual environment, a place where the pursuit of knowledge would be untethered by the politics that had cast such a long shadow over Europe. Einstein, ever undecided about where his future lay, had at one point even considered settling back in Europe. Prestigious universities, including Oxford, had offered him lucrative positions, but by 1935, the decision was made he would remain in the United States permanently. Princeton became his new home, and the Institute for Advanced Study would be his intellectual sanctuary until his death in 1955. The struggle for science and meaning, Princeton years. Einstein's arrival in Princeton was marked by more than just academic pursuits. He soon became close friends with Kurt Gödel, a fellow intellectual who shared his passion for unraveling the mysteries of the universe. The two were often seen walking together, lost in thought, debating ideas that could shape the very foundations of mathematics and physics. Einstein's quest during this period was daunting. He sought to develop a unified field theory, a framework that would link all the forces of the universe into a single, elegant theory. This was the last great scientific challenge he set for himself, but it was a challenge that eluded him until his final days. His years in Princeton were not just marked by scientific endeavor, but also by his growing sense of responsibility to the world around him. Princeton was home, but America, in the 1930s and 40s, was far from a utopia. Einstein, a Jewish immigrant who had experienced firsthand the horrors of anti-Semitism in Europe, quickly became an outspoken advocate for another oppressed community in his adopted homeland, African Americans. The fight against racism, Einstein's civil rights advocacy. As Einstein settled into his role at the Institute for Advanced Study, he couldn't help but notice the stark social inequalities around him. America was a land of opportunity, yet racism ran deep, and segregation was a blight on the country's moral landscape. While Einstein marveled at the individual freedoms America provided, freedoms that had been systematically stripped away in Germany, he could not turn a blind eye to the oppression faced by African Americans. Einstein's involvement in the fight for civil rights began in Princeton, where he joined the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He would later remark that racism was America's worst disease, a societal illness passed down from generation to generation. His words carried a unique power. As a Jew, Einstein had endured persecution, and he saw a tragic parallel in the way Black Americans were treated in their own country. "Perhaps I can understand and empathize with how black people feel as victims of discrimination," he once said. Einstein's activism was not limited to words. He corresponded with prominent civil rights leaders, including W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the most vocal advocates for African American rights. In 1951, when Du Bois was charged with being a foreign agent, a serious accusation in the climate of Cold War America, Einstein offered to serve as a character witness. His offer alone was enough to make the judge drop the case entirely. Such was the respect and influence Einstein commanded, not just as a scientist, but as a moral leader. A historic visit, Lincoln University and Einstein's stand against racism. One of the most memorable moments in Einstein's civil rights journey came in 1946 when he visited Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. Lincoln was a historic institution, the first in the country to award degrees to African Americans, and its alumni included civil rights giants like Thurgood Marshall and Langston Hughes. For the faculty and students at Lincoln, Einstein was more than just a celebrated physicist. He was a symbol of justice. During his visit, he was awarded an honorary degree, a gesture of mutual respect. Standing before an audience of black students, Einstein gave a speech that left a lasting impression. In it, he condemned racism in no uncertain terms, stating, "I do not intend to be quiet about it." His words were not empty rhetoric. He had long been committed to using his platform to highlight the injustice faced by African Americans. In a quiet but profound act of generosity, Einstein even paid the tuition of a young black student from Princeton, ensuring that access to education would not be denied based on the color of his skin. Becoming American, Einstein's citizenship and reflections on freedom. In 1940, 7 years after his arrival, Einstein became a US citizen. The moment was symbolic of more than just a legal status. It marked his deep connection to the principles of freedom and democracy that he had come to admire in America. Einstein often spoke of how, in the United States, individuals were encouraged to think freely and creatively without the social barriers that often stifled European intellectual life. He had seen firsthand how meritocracy allowed for new ideas to flourish, and it was in this intellectual climate that Einstein thrived. Yet, Einstein also remained an outsider in some respects. He was acutely aware of the contradictions in American society. On the one hand, it was a country of immense creativity and opportunity. On the other, it was plagued by inequality, with deeply entrenched racism and a society still struggling to live up to its ideals of liberty and justice for all. Einstein's activism in the civil rights movement was his way of reconciling these contradictions, pushing the country he now called home toward a future where all people were treated with dignity. Legacy beyond science, Einstein's lasting influence. As Einstein grew older, his scientific pursuits shifted, and his once burning desire to develop a unified field theory began to wane. He spent more time reflecting on his place in the world and the legacy he would leave behind. While he may not have succeeded in his final scientific quest, his contributions to both physics and society were monumental. His outspoken stance on civil rights, his condemnation of nuclear weapons, and his tireless defense of freedom made him a beacon of hope in a turbulent 20th century. Einstein's home in Princeton, where he lived from 1935 until his death in 1955, would later become a national historic landmark, a physical reminder of the man who had not only revolutionized our understanding of the universe, but had also fought for a better, more just world. In the end, Einstein was more than just a physicist. He was a global citizen, a moral leader, and a voice for the oppressed. His time in the United States, at the Institute for Advanced Study was not only marked by scientific exploration, but by a profound commitment to humanity. His journey from Europe to America was one of personal transformation, and through his words and actions, Einstein left an indelible mark on both science and society.